On April 10, 2008, when Chris Short returned home in the afternoon, he was horrified to discover his stepdaughter collapsed on the floor. Chris immediately contacted the police, who were met with a scene straight from a horror movie upon arrival. Megan was found half naked, laying in a large pool of blood with multiple stab wounds, and she was pronounced deceased on the spot.
Her limbs were bound with tape, and initial medical assessments hinted at signs of sexual assault. The detectives were deeply disturbed by the brutality of the crime, and questions lingered in the minds of everyone. Who could commit such an atrocity against an innocent girl beloved by all? Investigations were carried out, eventually leading to the revealing of the shocking culprit no one had even suspected. This is the heart-wrenching case of Megan Landowski. Nestled by the Chesapeake Bay in Portsmouth, Virginia, stands a bustling seaport town, renowned for hosting both the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard. Its streets, adorned with trees, provide home to the naval officers and their families. Among them was Navy officer Chris Short, alongside his wife Angela and 3 stepchildren, Elizabeth Gable, Megan Landowski, and Corey Landowski. Having spent a year stationed in Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, Chris was transferred to a naval hospital in Portsmouth, much to the relief of the family. The eldest among the siblings, 16-year-old Megan Landowski, wasted no time in enrolling in dance classes upon their relocation. Megan harbored a deep passion for dance, showcasing remarkable talent and aptitude from the outset. Starting with ballet, she swiftly expanded her repertoire to encompass various genres. Her mother described her as beautiful, friendly, and talented, and Megan seamlessly integrated into her new academic environment at Woodrow Wilson High School. Possessing a magnetic personality, Megan effortlessly attracted classmates, quickly forging friendships. Despite attending a prestigious high school primarily for dance, Megan expressed a desire to attend a regular high school to be with friends from her neighborhood. Described as vivacious and kind, Megan had a natural inclination for making connections, embracing friendships with everyone she encountered. Thursday, April 10, 2008, dawned like any other bright spring morning. Megan woke up early for school, engaging in a conversation with her mother regarding an impending test before heading off for her classes. After exchanging farewells, they went their separate ways. Unbeknownst to Angela, this would be the last time she laid her eyes on her daughter alive. Megan's school day ended early and she went home. Her mother told her that she expected her call when she reached home. Upon arrival, Megan left a voicemail detailing how her day went, reassuring her mother of her safe return, and ended by telling her she loved her. She then went on to begin preparing lunch for herself. However, things took a dark and disturbing turn. Around 4 p.m. that afternoon, Chris, Megan's stepfather, returned home to find the door open. Though initially unconcerned, knowing Megan had been warned about leaving it open, he intended to reprimand her. Calling out her name yielded only silence as he moved through the house. Upon entering the kitchen, he was confronted with a harrowing sight. Megan, lifeless on the floor, a victim of murder. Chris would later recall how he found her, likening her to a porcelain doll, hauntingly still and staring out to space. Local detective Doug Funkhauser was en route to celebrate his anniversary with his wife when he received the distressing call about a young girl's murder in town. Rushing to Roberts Court in Portsmouth, he was confronted with a horrifying sight. Bloodstains on the door handle caught his attention as he approached the residence. Inside, in the kitchen, he discovered the grisly scene. The teenager's partially naked body sprawled on the floor. Megan lay amidst a sizable pool of blood, bearing multiple stab wounds across her back, neck, face, and throat, with her mouth sealed shut with tape. For Detective Funkhauser, who was a seasoned investigator, this case stood out as one of the most brutal he had ever encountered, compounded by the fact that the victim was a young child. The thought of his own 3 children intensified his determination to bring the perpetrator to justice. Despite Megan not having invited the killer into the house, there were no signs of forced entry. However, a leaf discovered inside, traced back to the bush by the window, indicated that the assailant had gained access through the first-floor window. Upon entry, the assault initiated in an upstairs bedroom, evident from the disarrayed bed that suggested a struggle had ensued. Her underwear lay discarded on the floor, and beneath the left corner of the bed was a tape dispenser that seemingly matched the tape used to bind her arms and face. Bloodstains on the tape were collected for analysis.
Additionally, police gathered pillows, sheets, and blankets from the bed. As forensic experts delved deeper, the bedroom yielded increasingly disturbing evidence. Seminal fluid discovered on the duvet and in Megan's underwear indicated she had been sexually assaulted before the vicious attack downstairs. Megan sustained 43 stab wounds, 11 inflicted after her death. As mentioned earlier, she was found naked from the waist down, with her arms bound behind her using tape. It didn't take long for the forensic team to identify the potential murder weapon. They noticed a knife was missing from the holder on the kitchen counter, later locating it in the sink. It was determined that Megan was initially attacked in her room but managed to run downstairs before being fatally assaulted. The perpetrator then traversed the house, leaving behind footprints. They then washed their hands in the sink, leaving behind one of the 2 knives used in the murder. The other knife, taken from the kitchen knife block, was discovered in a storm drain nearby. Detectives knew that they needed to arrest the killer, and they had to do it urgently. The investigation commenced quickly, with officers canvassing the neighborhood, diligently seeking witnesses who might have observed or heard anything untoward during the time of the crime. Alarmingly, no one came forward with any pertinent information. It appeared the perpetrator had managed to escape in broad daylight. Fear gripped the town, with parents anxiously concerned for the safety of their children, many too frightened to sleep at night, knowing a killer was still at large. Following the initial shock after their daughter's murder, Angela and Chris promptly informed the police of their suspicion regarding the perpetrator's identity. They implicated a former acquaintance with a troubled past, confident in their belief. When Megan had just turned 16 years old, she was sexually assaulted by Robert Hickey, a Navy colleague of her stepfather, Chris. Robert served as a fellow Navy tech alongside Chris. Chris mentioned that they quickly developed a close bond and regularly extended invitations to the Hickey family. Following this, Megan's demeanor had changed, characterized by being withdrawn and a decline in academic performance. Chris inquired about her well-being, but Megan initially hesitated to confide in him. Eventually, Chris persuaded Megan to share what bothered her, and she opened up. Robert was secretly sexually assaulting her. Chris was angered and disgusted, immediately cutting off all connections with the Hickey family and reporting the abuse. At this point, Megan's parents had initiated legal action just 5 months before her murder, with a trial awaiting. They now suspected that Robert had killed Megan to prevent her from testifying against him, fearing the potential damage to his reputation and the risk of incarceration. Megan had even voiced concerns about him coming after her, and tragically, it appeared her apprehensions had materialized. Officers were dispatched to Hickey's residence for a search, but unfortunately, they found no incriminating evidence linking him to the murder. However, upon later examination of his computer, clear signs of an attempt to erase the hard drive were discovered. A recently deleted file was uncovered during the search, revealing illicit photos of underage children and resulting in Hickey being found in possession of child porn. This discovery elevated Robert as the primary suspect. He was brought in for questioning regarding the murder, with authorities hoping for a confession. Despite appearing visibly nervous during the interview, Robert claimed to have been at the Navy base the entire day of Megan's murder, denying any involvement and asserting that he had not left the base on the day of the incident. After corroborating his timeline with his colleagues, the police realized that there was a period of time during which Robert hadn't been seen, raising the possibility of his involvement in the murder. Surveillance footage from the base was obtained, but no sign of Robert leaving was observed. Nevertheless, he remained a suspect and couldn't be entirely ruled out. A DNA swab was taken from Robert to compare with the DNA found at the crime scene. The results came as a surprise. There was no match. Robert was not Megan's killer. This setback left officers feeling disheartened as they found themselves without leads or suspects. Attention shifted towards Chris, who had found her body. After obtaining a DNA sample, he was swiftly ruled out as a suspect. Additionally, all of Megan's family members, including her younger brother Corey, were cleared. An autopsy later revealed the brutality of the murder, with Megan being subjected to what was termed as an overkill. The level of violence suggested intense anger from the perpetrator, raising questions about their motive. Given Megan's popularity and lack of enemies, it seemed likely that the culprit was someone known to her. But with no apparent enemies, the mystery deepened regarding who would commit such a horrific act. As the investigation yielded no suspects, Megan's parents grappled with the unsettling prospect of her case remaining unresolved, depriving them of justice for their daughter. Detectives decided to delve deeper into Megan's school life, considering the prospect of a clandestine boyfriend, an admirer, or an adversary within her school community. They interrogated Megan's close friend in hopes of uncovering potential leads, but she was unable to offer any valuable insights. Subsequently, police interviewed other acquaintances from Woodrow Wilson High School, revealing that Megan had engaged in a few romantic relationships, but none of them were really serious. While none of these individuals emerged as suspects, authorities opted to collect DNA samples from them as a precautionary measure to eliminate any potential connections. Forensic experts specializing in biogeographical analysis re-examined the DNA evidence collected from the crime scene in an effort to determine the geographical origin of the perpetrator. Their analysis indicated that they were seeking an African-American male. Despite 6 months elapsing with no significant breakthroughs in the case, a breakthrough occurred when a cooperative classmate provided the police with valuable information: a list of boys whom Megan had occasionally engaged in flirtatious interactions. Upon review, all individuals on the list except one had already been interviewed. This exception was 17-year-old Robert Lee Barnes. Apart from her actual school education, Megan had also been enrolled in a performing arts program at Churchill High School, where Robert Barnes was also a participant. Megan had once told her close friend that she believed Robert had feelings for her, feelings she did not reciprocate. Robert Barnes, a talented violinist, was regarded as a diligent student who never encountered any disciplinary issues at school and was not known to cause trouble. He shared a close friendship with Megan and had even visited her home on several occasions. According to her parents, he was always polite and very kind. When police located him for questioning regarding Megan, the interview followed the standard procedure, just like the other previous interviews they had carried out. Robert informed investigators that Megan was a kind and pleasant individual, expressing disbelief at the notion of anyone wishing her harm. He mentioned their participation in recitals together and their occasional hangouts. Police didn't find anything suspicious during the interview until towards the end of it. When asked if he would provide a DNA sample, Robert hesitated before refusing, which raised eyebrows among investigators since all of Megan's other classmates had been cooperative. Robert politely explained that his mother wouldn't agree to it, but police clarified that parental consent wasn't necessary, especially considering Robert was now 17 years old. Despite this, Robert declined once again. Investigators couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss with Robert Barnes. After concluding the interview, they instructed him to seek his mother's consent for the DNA sample and to contact them afterward. The following day, investigators received a call from Robert requesting a meeting. When asked if he had sought his mother's consent, he replied, "No, but you can have my bubble gum." Robert removed the gum from his mouth, placed it in a latex glove, and handed it over. Despite his change of heart, investigators still remained suspicious of Robert. Later on, the detective received a call from the lab analyzing the bubble gum. They inquired about the sample's origin. After confirming that he had observed Robert placing the gum into the glove, they questioned whether he had been under constant observation, as the DNA, much to their surprise, matched that of a female. Robert had switched the gum he was chewing with a different piece that he provided as his sample. On October 23, 2008, Robert Barnes was summoned for questioning once more, and this time accompanied by his mother to confront him with the DNA findings. During the interview, after he was questioned about the bubble gum, Robert slipped up by stating, "This happened on a Thursday." Up to that point, none of the individuals interviewed by the police had been aware of the exact day and date of the murder. When officers pointed this out to him, he offered an absurd explanation. He spun a tale alleging that on that particular day, Megan had asked him to come by her home. Upon arrival, he allegedly discovered Megan being held at gunpoint by a masked individual. According to Robert, the assailant then turned the firearm on him, coercing him to tie Megan up. He further claimed that he was compelled to commit sexual assault on Megan under duress. Subsequently, he asserted that they all went downstairs, where the gunman proceeded to stab Megan after seizing a knife. Robert asserted that the assailant then forced him to cut himself, ensuring his blood would be present at the crime scene. Robert had fabricated this narrative in an attempt to portray himself as a victim and explain away any potential incriminating evidence against him. However, law enforcement remained skeptical of his account and did not buy any of his claims. Presenting him with the evidence of footprints, they questioned why only his footprints were found and not those of the alleged assailant. Robert's mother intervened, advising him to stop speaking, and vouched for his character, claiming he was a good and innocent kid. The police took a sample of his actual DNA this time round. Upon DNA analysis, the results confirmed a match between Robert's DNA and the assailant's, undermining his claims. Robert Barnes was arrested for the murder of Megan Landowski. The news left Megan's parents in shock, as they couldn't fathom that the quiet boy who used to ride the school bus with their daughter could be capable of such violence. According to police, Robert likely gained entry to the home through the window that afternoon, surprising Megan in her bedroom before committing the atrocious acts. Megan managed to flee downstairs, but Robert pursued her, stabbing her with a kitchen knife and continued to do so, even after her death. Afterward, he departed the scene, carrying on with his life as if nothing had occurred. The investigators speculated that Robert developed an unhealthy obsession over Megan, while Megan only desired a platonic relationship between them. When Robert's advances were rebuffed, he resorted to coercion, ultimately spiraling down a destructive path that culminated in tragedy. In September 2009, Robert opted for a special plea arrangement that spared him from being tried as an adult, as he had turned 18. He admitted guilt to charges of first-degree murder and aggravated sexual battery. Robert Lee Barnes received a 42-year prison sentence and remains incarcerated at the Red Onion State Prison in Wise County, Virginia. Whether driven by love, desire, bitterness, or the sting of rejection, none of these justified Robert's actions and his atrocious deeds to someone he claimed to love and care for. Instead of accepting to move on, he chose a dark path that led to a tragic fate, ending the life of an innocent soul and, in the process, ruining his life and affecting the lives of Megan's loved ones. Megan Landowski's tragic story mirrors countless others, highlighting the perilous consequences that can arise from such situations. We extend our heartfelt prayers and thoughts to her departed soul and the loved ones she left behind. When a famously eccentric doctor and his partner constructed a satanically inspired mansion in rural Georgia in 1977, they named it the Corpsewood Manor. Just 5 years later, this intriguing abode became the scene of a chilling crime, making its ominous name a haunting reality. As we delve into the dark and mysterious story of the Corpsewood Manor, we uncover the gruesome murders that turned it into a true crime destination. This is the strange case of the Corpsewood Manor murders. Dr. Charles Lee Scudder was born on October 6, 1926, in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin, USA, to parents Charles Morrison and Eleanor Edith Lee. During the 1940s, he attended Oberlin College, where he participated in the school's drama program and studied music and art. As a young man, he displayed exceptional intelligence and a wide range of interests. Scudder later studied at Loyola University and Loyola's Stritch School of Medicine, earning degrees in zoology, languages, and chemistry, and ultimately obtaining a PhD in pharmacology. At Loyola, he studied under Dr. Alexander Karchmar. Following his graduation, Scudder became the Associate Director of the Institute for Mind, Drugs, and Behavior at Loyola University of Chicago and served as an Associate Professor of Pharmacology at Loyola's Stritch School of Medicine, balancing roles as both a researcher and instructor. In a later interview, Karchmar described Scudder as a unique and eccentric individual, noting his habits of dyeing his hair in colors like purple and red and keeping a monkey as a pet. Scudder was also a skilled harp player and had even been invited to perform with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. According to Dr. Karchmar, Scudder had a deep belief in the unity of the universe and published experimental results on this subject. On September 10, 1946, Scudder married his first wife, Helen Kilbourne Hazlett, in St. Joseph, Berrien, Michigan. Helen, who was born in Chicago, Illinois, had studied with him at Oberlin College. Their marriage eventually ended in divorce. A few years later, in the early 1950s, he married Bortai Bunting, the daughter of British modernist poet Basil Bunting and Marion Culver. Scudder and Bortai had 4 sons together, namely Saul, Gideon, Fenris, and Ahab, before they eventually separated as well. In 1959, Scudder met Joseph Odom and brought him on as his personal assistant and housekeeper. Joseph, known to everyone as Joey,
was 12 years younger than Scudder and took on the roles of cook and housekeeper for Dr. Scudder and his sons. They lived together in an aging mansion on Adams Street on Chicago's west side, which Scudder had purchased. The mansion, built in 1904 and designed by a student of Frank Lloyd Wright, was located in a rough neighborhood. Despite this, Scudder enjoyed the mansion's fading grandeur and the ample space it provided for his various hobbies, including collecting antiques, creating his own paintings, playing the harp, caring for 2 large English mastiffs, and engaging in lively correspondence with individuals and institutions, including Anton LaVey. Scudder and Odom were irresistibly drawn to each other and soon became inseparable. Their strong bond would endure for the rest of their lives, despite their differences. Scudder was highly educated and cultured, while Odom was a blue-collar worker who had left school in the 5th grade and had a troubled past with the law. Dr. Scudder wrote about him saying, "He'd learned far more about the world than I had with all my degrees, and somewhere along the line he'd developed a talent for whipping up meals fit for a king." Odom dreamed of cooking on a wood stove and living a simpler life. Neighbors and visitors to Corpsewood still remembered Odom for his exceptional culinary skills. By the 1970s, Scudder's sons had all grown up and moved out to pursue their own lives. Scudder and Odom, who had been hired in 1959 to help with the children and had since become lovers, continued living in the mansion. However, Dr. Scudder grew disillusioned with his career and weary of the deteriorating neighborhood. On December 17, 1975, after several months of searching for land in the southeast, Dr. Scudder purchased the southeast quarter of Lot 248 in the 6th Land District of Chattooga County, Georgia, from John S. Cooper of Floyd County for $10,500. In 1976, on his 50th birthday, Scudder resigned from Loyola University of Chicago and relocated with his partner, friend, and housekeeper Odom to Chattooga County, Georgia, seeking a simpler lifestyle in the mountains of the Chattahoochee National Forest. He decided to leave his academic position to live off the grid in a rural, self-sustaining environment. Frustrated with the challenges of academic research, he yearned for the tranquility of nature and a degree of isolation. Consequently, he purchased 40 acres of undeveloped mountainous land in rural Georgia. Scudder and Odom arrived at their property during an ice storm, bringing their 2 dogs and whatever they could fit in their Jeep and small camper van. As they made their way to the hilltop, they encountered a dead horse blocking the logging trail, which they instantly and jokingly named Dead Horse Road. With no existing living quarters on the property, Scudder purchased a trailer to serve as their temporary home during the construction process, which ultimately took over 2 years. They built a castle-like house of Scudder's own design atop a mountain, naming it Corpsewood Manor, in honor of the appearance of the surrounding trees when they arrived that winter. Scudder dedicated 6 years to building, digging, planting, and nurturing the land that sustained him and his companion. Odom planted a rose garden and enjoyed cooking on a wood stove. Hunters often visited them, enjoying their hospitality. The property included a vineyard, which they utilized as amateur winemakers. They formed friendships with some locals, who brought them fruit to be turned into Dr. Scudder's homemade wine. A wedding was also hosted in the rose garden, with Dr. Scudder playing the harp from the sun deck above the gazebo. In addition to their main residence, Scudder and Odom built a smaller 3-story structure on the property to serve both practical and personal needs. The first floor functioned as a chicken coop, while the second floor was used as a food pantry. The top level, known as the Pink Room, was dedicated entirely to pleasure. Here, the couple indulged in various hedonistic activities and invited others to join them. The parties they hosted in the Pink Room became legendary for their extreme debauchery, with abundant sex and drugs that delighted the regular attendees. However, the scandalous reputation of these gatherings also attracted attention from curious outsiders. While the Pink Room allowed for unrestricted indulgence, inappropriate behavior was strictly forbidden inside the manor. To Scudder and Odom, their living area was a home, not a place of immorality. This rule applied to both guests and themselves. They kept their hedonistic activities separate from their domestic life. An unspoken boundary had been established early in their relationship, which they both respected. In the Pink Room, they could freely indulge without fear of consequences. Although most community members chose to mind their own business, the more religious locals began spreading rumors that the mild-mannered newcomers were actually devil worshippers. Scudder continued his artistic pursuits, painting and crafting stained glass pieces for the windows of the house. Among his creations was a stained glass Baphomet sigil, a symbol associated with the Church of Satan. His interest in the occult was evident in the pentagrams painted on his black Jeep and in the catalogues and books found in the house. While Scudder openly embraced Satanism, Odom, in contrast, claimed to be Catholic. Scudder made no effort to conceal his religious affiliations and even discussed his involvement with the Church of Satan openly, despite potential consequences. To further express his interests, he adorned corpsewood with stone gargoyles and commissioned a bed headboard featuring a demon's face carved into the wood. Despite his outward appearances, Scudder was not a devil worshipper. Rather, he believed in enjoying earthly pleasures without succumbing to guilt. Those who knew him well attested to his kindness, stating that he wouldn't harm a fly. If anything, his sin was his refusal to let others dictate his actions or beliefs. However, even those disposed towards Scudder and Odom eventually began to label them as the devil worshippers. Despite this negative characterization, many locals still visited Corpsewood to admire the progress of its cautious conviviality. Life at Corpsewood, while mostly enjoyable, had its challenges. Scudder gradually realized that self-reliance came with its own set of drawbacks. On particularly difficult days, he found himself longing for the simplicity of a time when others handled life's problems. Yet, when these moments of despair subsided, Scudder would look around at everything he and Odom had accomplished, and a sense of contentment would wash over him. On December 12, 1982, the life that Scudder and Odom had so carefully crafted was shattered when Tony West and Avery Brock, accompanied by their friends Joey Wells and Teresa Hudgens, visited Corpsewood Manor. Tony and Avery believed that Scudder was secretly wealthy and that the manor held valuable treasures. They planned to eliminate Scudder and Odom so they could take over the property. Upon arrival, the group of four went up the third floor of the chicken house referred to as the Pink Room and joined Scudder. They drank wine and sniffed a concoction made of varnish, paint thinner and other substances in a plastic bag. Odom, who had looked forward to a quiet evening at home, had opted not to participate. Instead of joining in the activities, he had stayed in the main house with the dogs. Although Brock had visited the house several times before and had planned to rob it with West while Wells and Hudgens acted as lookouts, their plans quickly turned disastrous. After about an hour of casual conversation, Brock made an excuse to leave, claiming he had forgotten something in his truck. Meanwhile, West, Wells, and Hudgens kept Scudder occupied. Brock returned with a rifle he had retrieved from his truck, holding it tightly. Upon re-entering the house, Brock cornered Odom and fatally shot him in the chest at close range. He then searched for the dogs and found them asleep by the wood stove, where he killed them as well. Returning to the Pink Room, Brock made no attempt to conceal the rifle as he rejoined the others. Despite being heavily intoxicated, Scudder noticed the weapon and jokingly said, "Bang, bang," before turning away from the drug-fueled party. A few minutes later, Brock and West forcefully lifted Scudder to his feet, making it clear to him that the situation was actually serious. They escorted him to the main residence. Meanwhile, Wells and Hudgens attempted to leave out of fear, seeking refuge in the safety of the truck. However, West ordered them to return. The two young men, whom Scudder had considered friends, took a cruel pleasure in revealing the lifeless bodies of Odom and the dogs to him. Once they believed Scudder was sufficiently shocked into sobriety, they sat him down on a chair, bound his hands and feet, and demanded to know where he kept his money. Scudder explained that he had invested all his funds into the manor and insisted there were no hidden riches on the property. However, they weren't buying that, and they were not about to give up easily either. In a sudden move, Scudder rose from his chair and began to shuffle toward Odom's lifeless body while Brock and West argued about their next steps. West commanded Scudder to sit back down, but Scudder continued his aimless murmuring, determined to reach his partner's side. Seeing this, West seized the rifle and aimed it directly at Scudder, the man whose life they had just shattered. Just as West was about to pull the trigger, Scudder suddenly became completely lucid. Facing his assailant, he calmly uttered, "I asked for this." Unaffected by the eerie confession, West fired 5 shots into Scudder's face. With their only guide to the supposed treasure gone, the pair ransacked the house in search of valuables. They even attempted to steal Scudder's harp, but found it too large to fit in their vehicle.
Having betrayed the homeowners' trust and committed cold-blooded murder, they left with scarcely more than they possessed upon arrival. Wells and Hudgens, traumatized by the events, went into hiding, while Brock and West fled to Mississippi. There they committed another murder during a carjacking 3 days later, targeting a Navy officer on his way home for Christmas. They stole his car, clothes, and what little cash he had. On December 14th, Raymond Williams, a friend of Scudder, visited Corpsewood Manor to deliver news of a mutual acquaintance's passing in a neighboring town. Receiving no response,
He entered the residence and discovered gunshot damage at the door. Concerned, Raymond descended the mountain and went to notify the authorities. Coincidentally, on the same day that the bodies of Scudder and Odom were discovered, Teresa Hudgens voluntarily went to the police station in Somerville, Georgia, and surrendered herself.
She explained that she would have come forward earlier, but her boyfriend Wells had prevented her from doing so. Hudgens proceeded to provide the authorities with a detailed account of the events of that fateful night, including the identities of the perpetrators. Following her confession, the dots had been connected and a nationwide manhunt was initiated. Brock and West parted ways in Austin, Texas, after a heated argument about their plans. Brock surrendered to the police in Marietta, Georgia, on December, and West was apprehended on Christmas Eve in Chattanooga, Tennessee. According to newspaper reports from the time, during the investigation of the murders, law enforcement officers discovered unsettling items at Corpsewood Manor. These included 2 human skulls, 3 vials allegedly containing lysergic acid diethylamide, or LSD-25, various occult tools, a small occult library, a large collection of academic and literature books, and home pornography. The Chattooga County Sheriff's Office labeled Scudder and Odom as devil worshippers based on these findings. Additionally, a painting depicting Scudder gagged with blood dripping from 5 bullet wounds, which he had created months earlier, was found in the house. There had been previous attempts to bring charges against Dr. Scudder and Odom for their unconventional behavior, but these efforts failed due to protections provided by freedom of religion. Their friend Raymond William informed reporters that Charles had become involved with the Church of Satan, but clarified that he wasn't an active participant. Scudder told me he was actually an atheist and that he joined to explore its beliefs, Raymond explained. Like many others in Chattooga County, Georgia, Raymond was unaware that the philosophy of the Church of Satan is atheistic, and its members may not necessarily worship any supernatural being. Just weeks before his death, Scudder had received a birthday card from the Church of Satan in San Francisco, wishing him a happy 56th birthday. During the trial of West and Brock, accusations were made against Scudder, alleging that he had spiked the wine with LSD in an attempt to engage in oral sex with them. However, when the police tested the bottle of wine, no trace of LSD was found. West attempted to use a defense of involuntary intoxication. His attorney argued he had a motive because he was homosexual. However, the jury disregarded this prejudiced line of argument. Additionally, West confessed to a Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent that he and Brock had planned the murders and robbery a few days prior to the killings. He further disclosed to the GBI agent that Brock wanted to kill Scudder because Scudder had previously engaged in oral sex with Brock. During the trial, Dr. Karchmar was also approached for an interview. During this interview, Karchmar affirmed that Scudder was not a drug user or a follower of devil worship, and that he was trustworthy. He further stated that, to his knowledge, Scudder had never conducted any research involving LSD and appeared to disapprove of drug usage. In an effort to conclude the ordeal, 17-year-old Avery Brock pleaded guilty to all charges and received 3 consecutive life sentences for his involvement in the murders. 30-year-old Tony West was convicted and initially sentenced to death, a penalty later commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Both Brock and West are presently incarcerated in Georgia and have been denied parole on multiple occasions. It is unfortunate what happened to the victims in this case. As we reflect on this heart-wrenching tale, our thoughts are with the victims whose lives were tragically cut short and the loved ones they left behind. In the tranquil suburbs of Melbourne, Australia, the abrupt end of a young woman's bright future unveiled a harrowing story that would shock the entire community. This is the story of Celeste Mano, a narrative of ambition, kindness, and an unexpected, tragic conclusion. Celeste, a vibrant and compassionate young woman, was celebrated for her infectious smile and generous heart. With a life brimming with promise, she aspired to make a significant, positive impact on the world. Yet, unbeknownst to many, a hidden danger loomed in the background. Celeste Mano entered the world on November 22, 1996, in the vibrant city of Melbourne, Australia. Her parents, Tony Mano and Aggie D. Mauro, welcomed her with open arms, alongside her older brother, Alessandro. From a young age, Celeste found joy in dancing and quickly became a cherished figure among her peers. Her bond with her mother, Aggie, was particularly strong, so much so that even as a 23-year-old, Celeste still found comfort in her mother's nightly tucks into bed. By June 2019, Celeste had established herself as a capable leader in a call center, diligently rising to the position of team leader. However, one fateful day at work, she found herself in the unexpected role of escorting a recently dismissed colleague out of the building, a task she hadn't foreseen. Celeste had no prior acquaintance with the dismissed colleague, yet she empathized with his situation. As they bid farewell, Celeste offered a gesture of goodwill, extending her hand for a handshake. However, before she could react, the man unexpectedly pulled her close and planted a kiss on her cheek. This encounter marked Celeste's first direct interaction with 35-year-old Luai Nadasako. The incident left Celeste feeling deeply embarrassed, prompting her to confide in her mother upon returning home that evening. Despite Celeste's discomfort, her mother dismissed the incident, attributing the man's actions to a harmless crush. Acknowledging her mother's wisdom and convinced it was merely a passing infatuation, Celeste chose to move past the uncomfortable encounter. With her focus on her blossoming relationship with Chris Risdale, a co-worker from the call center, she relegated the incident with Luai to the past. Yet shortly after Luai's termination, he unexpectedly reached out to Celeste through Instagram. "I can't stop thinking about you," he wrote. "I can't get your eyes and gorgeous smile out of my head." Feeling unsettled, Celeste sought comfort in her mother's counsel once more. However, from that moment forward, Luai's obsession with Celeste escalated rapidly as he inundated her with increasingly intimate messages. "I've never felt this way about anyone in my entire life. I'm totally infatuated with you, captivated and fascinated by you. I'd give my life and the world to you, just to be with you." In a polite message, Celeste conveyed to Luai that she didn't share his feelings and requested him to refrain from contacting her further, as his advances made her uncomfortable. However, it appeared that her rejection only served to intensify his pursuit. She wrote, "Stop contacting me as this is making me very uncomfortable. Please respect my wishes and stop." Despite Celeste's repeated requests for Luai to cease contacting her, his messages persisted incessantly. Over time, they took on a more aggressive and hostile tone. In one message he wrote, "I love you with all my heart, so forgive me when I say this, but you're lame." Despite Celeste's efforts to block Luai's accounts, he persisted by creating new profiles to continue harassing her. The relentless stalking took its toll, prompting Celeste to abandon pleading with him and instead opt to ignore his messages. However, this only seemed to exacerbate Luai's desperation. In a lengthy message, he expressed his anger, accusing Celeste of being no different from other women and vowing to prove his worth to the world. He declared an end to their communication, but regrettably, he failed to uphold this promise. Chris, Celeste's boyfriend, opened up about the anguish he felt witnessing the toll of the harassment on Celeste. She lived in constant fear, unable to eat or sleep as the relentless stalking persisted. Concerns escalated when Celeste's mother, Aggie, voiced worries about the possibility of the stalker discovering their home address. Celeste, however, brushed off her mother's concerns, believing that the harassment would cease once the stalker realized her lack of interest. Sadly, this optimism was short-lived, offering only a glimpse into the impending horror yet to unfold. After enduring 6 months of relentless harassment, Celeste and Aggie reached a breaking point. They made the difficult decision to visit their local police station to file a report. However, their hopes were dashed when the police informed them that Luai's actions did not constitute a crime, leaving them feeling helpless. The officer they spoke to advised Celeste to simply ignore him, prompting her to explain that she had already been doing so to no avail. In response, the officer said, "Well, that's just social media these days. If you don't like it, get off social media."
The police's refusal to help left Celeste feeling increasingly powerless and exposed. Not only did they decline to take Luai's name, but they also did not assist whatsoever. Over the next 6 months, the situation deteriorated significantly. Luai Sako escalated his harassment by appearing outside Celeste's workplace, followed by stalking her and even discovering her home address by trailing her one evening after work. His messages on Instagram turned from intrusive to sexually explicit, amplifying Celeste's sense of fear and vulnerability. "Have you ever had a beast pounce on you, Celeste?" he wrote. "I want some fun. Celeste, if you had my body for a day, what would you do with me? A single girl like yourself is bound to be switching from one cock to another. Probably because deep down you know you're kinky. Hence, this makes you a slut." Luai Sako's fixation had taken a disturbing turn, with his messages now vividly depicting explicit and vulgar fantasies involving Celeste. This alarming escalation left Celeste and her loved ones deeply concerned about Luai's intentions. Determined to address the growing threat, Celeste and Aggie returned to the police once more. This time, they encountered a more receptive officer who listened attentively to Celeste's account. Taking decisive action, the officer collected a comprehensive statement from Celeste and recorded all pertinent details about Luai Sako. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, he advised Celeste to seek an intervention order without delay to protect herself from further harm. Following legal proceedings, Luai found himself served with a personal safety intervention order, effectively barring him from contacting Celeste. Any breach of this order would result in his immediate arrest. Despite this legal intervention, Aggie remained unconvinced of her daughter's safety and issued a solemn warning to Celeste. "This is just a piece of paper, sweetie. Let's remember that." For a month, it appeared that the intervention order had effectively halted Luai's harassment. However, Celeste's respite was short-lived when a 3-page letter from Luai suddenly appeared in her Instagram inbox. In the letter, Luai pleaded with Celeste to cease what he perceived as her interference in his life, despite the clear legal boundaries established by the intervention order. "Please see reason, Celeste. Please, Celeste. The ball is in your court." There's a desperation in my voice because I'm afraid. I'm afraid that my life is fast derailing and steering off track. Everything that I've worked for and improved on suddenly seems to be fading away. But there's still time to undo this, Celeste. Please undo this. These were just some of Luai's pleas and grievances in the letter. Continuing in the same vein, Luai shifted the blame onto Celeste for the predicament he found himself in, absolving himself of any responsibility for his actions. He implored Celeste to end what he termed as nonsense by retracting the intervention order and dropping the stalking and harassment charges against him. He painted a picture of a potential future where both of them could find peace if Celeste made the right choice to acquiesce to his demands. Despite Luai's breach of the intervention order, Celeste promptly alerted the authorities, leading to Luai's arrest. This moment brought a sense of relief to both Aggie and Celeste, who believed that their nightmare ordeal had finally reached its conclusion. However, their relief was short-lived, as Luai's next move involved acquiring a weapon. Meanwhile, with the immediate threat seemingly addressed, Celeste began to embrace a newfound sense of freedom. For the first time in a year, she felt carefree, no longer burdened by the constant fear of looking over her shoulder. Celeste and her boyfriend, Christopher, shared a delightful date at a charming rooftop bar in the picturesque town of Fitzroy, Melbourne, a cherished memory for Christopher. Little did the couple know that this outing would be one of their last together. Their final photograph captured them radiating happiness on a sunlit day, and Celeste eagerly anticipated sharing the image on social media. Tragically, it was this very photo that would incite Luai Sako to perpetrate his most atrocious act yet, an act that would abruptly end Celeste Mano's life, forever wrenching her from her grieving family. After being released from police custody, Luai resumed his sinister stalking of Celeste. He meticulously monitored her social media posts, scrutinizing her whereabouts, activities, and companions. He even resorted to surveilling her home, observing the windows to ascertain which room belonged to Celeste based on the activities within. On the fateful night of November 16, 2020, Celeste and Aggie found themselves alone at home. As bedtime approached, they exchanged loving goodnight wishes. Aggie's last memory of her daughter was at Celeste's bedroom door,
where she asked if Celeste wanted her bedroom light on or off. Celeste opted to leave it on, reassuring her mother that she would handle it later. "Okay, love you," Aggie expressed before closing the bedroom door. "Love you more," Celeste replied, sealing the tender moment between mother and daughter. In the early hours, just before 4 a.m., the tranquility of the night shattered as Luai Sacco, armed with a hammer and a large kitchen knife, forcefully smashed through Celeste's bedroom window, launching a brutal attack. The sound of splintering glass and tumultuous chaos jolted Aggie from her sleep, prompting her to sprint to her daughter's room, her heart pounding with terror. As Aggie entered the room, she was met with shards of glass underfoot and the chilling sight of blood staining the room. Frantically, she rushed to Celeste's side, her screams echoing in the night, pleading for answers as she tried to rouse her daughter. In her desperate attempts to pull Celeste from her bed, Aggie's heart sank as she realized her daughter lay lifeless, unmoving. Outside, security footage captured the chilling sight of Luai Sacco fleeing in his car, leaving behind a scene of devastation. Aggie fought desperately to save her daughter, her cries echoing through the house as she begged Celeste not to leave her. Tragically, despite her valiant efforts, it was too late. Celeste Mano had been brutally taken from her, leaving Aggie to grapple with the unimaginable grief of losing her beloved daughter. Emergency services swiftly descended upon the residence, and the police wasted no time in cordoning off the area, designating it a crime scene. As officers informed Aggie of the grim reality, revealing the discovery of a knife in Celeste's bedroom where the tragic incident occurred, Aggie's distress reached a fever pitch. In a moment of anguish, she cried out, "Oh my God, he killed her!" sending shockwaves through the attending officers. Aggie's assertion of knowing her daughter's assailant stunned the officers, who promptly noted down Luai Sacco's name. Subsequent forensic examination, detailed in the autopsy report, revealed the horrifying extent of Celeste Mano's injuries, a frenzied attack that left her with 23 stab wounds, with a fatal strike piercing her heart. Helpless in her slumber, Celeste stood no chance against the brutality of Luai Sacco. Yet tragically, his heinous act was far from over. Luai's subsequent actions underscored the calculated nature of Celeste's murder. He drove straight to the police station, seemingly intent on turning himself in. However, upon arrival, he began imploring officers to shoot him and shifted the blame onto law enforcement for Celeste's death. It became evident that Luai was attempting to evade conventional imprisonment by pleading mental impairment. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Aggie delved into the intricacies of the legal system, arming herself with knowledge to confront the impending legal battle. However, as she delved deeper into the workings of the justice system, her initial shock turned to seething anger. Over the next 3 arduous years, the case traversed the corridors of the court, each step a painful reminder of Celeste's tragic fate. Finally, after a protracted legal battle, Luai Sacco relented and pleaded guilty to the murder of Celeste. However, this admission came only after his attempts to convince psychiatrists of his supposed mental illness fell short. In the courtroom, Luai Sacco was compelled to confront a haunting symbol of his heinous act, a glowing orb crafted from the ashes of his victim, Celeste. As he faced his sentencing, Aggie's impassioned cries pierced the air, demanding that he acknowledge the devastation he had wrought. Despite her pleas, Luai, by then 39 years old, attempted to avert his gaze from the luminous reminder of his crime, placed prominently beside Aggie as she recounted her daughter's life to the court. The outcome of the sentencing delivered yet another blow to Celeste's grieving family. Aggie, in particular, was devastated to learn that her daughter's murderer would spend at least 30 years behind bars. Throughout the proceedings, Luai Sacco remained stoic, displaying no hint of emotion or remorse for his actions. Speaking outside the Victorian Supreme Court, Aggie, flanked by Celeste's father and brother, voiced her profound disappointment with Victoria's authorities. "We were forced to trust a system we lost faith in 3 years ago," she stated. "It failed Celeste then, and it has failed her again now." Aggie highlighted the unfulfilled promises of law reform on stalking that were made following Celeste's death. "I've had 3.5 years of endless meetings," she said. "When these officials met with me,
They made promises and commitments, vowing to begin with the Victorian Law Reform Commission's report on stalking laws. The VLRC report was tabled well over a year ago. I waited and waited until I could wait no longer. I eventually realized the door was shut. Many promises were made, but none were honored. Celeste's tragic end created an irreplaceable void in the lives of her family and friends, whose grief underscores the vibrant life that was unjustly taken from them. Their love and cherished memories sustain her spirit amidst their profound sorrow. In the wake of this tragedy, the community united to honor Celeste's memory, advocating for change and offering support to victims of stalking and violence. This collective action highlights the power of unity during times of crisis. Celeste Manot's story stands as a somber reminder of the need for vigilance, systemic reform, and the enduring strength of a community bonded by grief and determination. May her memory inspire us to work towards a safer world for everyone. Garbage collectors who were making their rounds early one morning found a home ablaze and immediately called in the fire brigade, who rushed to the scene. While extinguishing the fire, they observed movement in the upper bedroom window. Someone was trying to grab their attention and clearly needed help. Medical personnel were summoned to the location, and the individual, in a state of shock and unable to communicate, was rescued. Subsequently, the individual was transported to the hospital, where they later slipped into a coma. Meanwhile, bodies were recovered from the premises, and authorities determined that the victims had been murdered rather than perishing in the fire. This unsettling revelation prompted widespread speculation. Who could have perpetrated such a heinous crime against this innocent and beloved family? This is the shocking case of the Roman family. Jean-Claude Roman was born in Lons-le-Saunier, France on February 11, 1954, and raised in Clairvaux-les-Lacs in Jura. He attended Lons-le-Saunier's high school until he completed his baccalaureate. In 1971, he started classes at Lycée du Parc in Lyon, but left after one term. Later, he joined medical school. He would later marry a woman named Florence Crollet. Florence Crollet was born on March 6, 1956. She studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. It is there that she met Jean-Claude Roman. Jean-Claude, who was a distant cousin of the family, initially didn't catch Florence's interest. They also barely knew each other and didn't spend a lot of time together. However, over time, through their mutual friends and study sessions, they started spending more time together. Jean-Claude Roman was immediately smitten with Florence and made persistent efforts to win her over. She, on the other hand, saw him as an ordinary guy, not particularly attractive to her or well-spoken. Florence had envisioned marrying a typical doctor, intelligent, attractive, and charming. Following a failed second-year exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy. Together with Roman and Luc l'Admiral, who passed their exams, they maintained a routine for the next decade, studying, taking exams, and supporting each other until graduation. In 1980, Florence and Jean-Claude Roman tied the knot, and 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline's birth, their son Antoine arrived. Florence lived the life of a conventional wife and mother, working at local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. Florence was out and about in Ferney, France, a few days post-Christmas in 1992. Her children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, while Jean-Claude was at work in Geneva. It was a typical day, reminiscing about their recent Christmas festivities. While out, she bumped into the school president, who had something on his mind since before the holidays. Politely exchanging holiday greetings, they chatted about their Christmas experiences. The conversation gradually shifted to an intriguing incident involving Florence's husband. The president mentioned the headmaster's demotion due to an affair with a teacher, prompting a school board meeting. Florence remembered the incident, but was uncertain where the president was leading with the conversation. He mentioned his intention to discuss the matter with Jean-Claude, as he also served on the school board. The president's secretary attempted to find Jean-Claude's contact information in the World Health Organization directory, given his employment there, but strangely, his name was not listed. Florence found this amusing as she laughed it off, but at the same time, she was intrigued. She assured the president that there must be a valid explanation for the absence of his name and number, promising to address it with her husband upon his return from work. After exchanging farewells,
they never spoke again. Jean-Claude Roman kept his work life quite private, sharing minimal details with both family and friends. Florence held the belief that her husband engaged in significant research and commanded respect in the medical field. He maintained a clear boundary between his professional and personal life, to the extent that Florence never had access to his office phone number, as Roman had insisted on wanting to remain undisturbed during work hours. If Florence ever required urgent communication with him, she had to page him, and he would promptly return her call at his earliest convenience. Friends often inquired about Jean-Claude's role at the WHO in conversations with Florence. They would ask, "What exactly does Jean-Claude do at the WHO?" Florence would attempt to deflect the question with a chuckle, confessing that she too was uncertain. Occasionally, she would playfully speculate that one day she might discover her husband was a secret spy. It was during the Christmas season of 1992 that Florence learned of an annual Christmas tree event organized by the WHO. This gathering allowed staff members to bring their families to the office to decorate a large Christmas tree together. Surprisingly, her husband had never mentioned this event to her. Florence felt unsettled by the situation. From the school president's revelation about her husband's absence in the WHO directory to the discovery of the unmentioned family event at his workplace after over a decade of service, these incidents likely lingered in Florence's thoughts. The extent to which these revelations troubled Florence internally remains uncertain, as it is unclear whether she confronted her husband about them. As recounted by Florence's brother, who joined the family for the holiday season, a profound sadness seemed to shadow Florence during those days. The conversations that transpired within the household during this period are left to speculation. The days rolled by, ushering in the new year of 1993. A couple of days into the year, Florence and Jean-Claude Roman found themselves shopping together. Insisting that Roman purchase a new suit, Florence eventually persuaded him. Later that same day, after parting ways with his wife, Roman made a visit to a pharmacy, placing an order set to be ready by January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, Roman made withdrawals from 2 different ATMs, totaling 2,000 francs. He generously gave 500 francs to a homeless individual he encountered before proceeding to a gun store. Exiting the store, he carried tear gas canisters, cartridges, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun wand. Returning home, the night passed uneventfully, and time passes until a frantic call to the fire brigade was placed on January 11th at 4 a.m., reporting a fire engulfing the house. Garbage collectors on their early morning rounds discovered the blazing house and promptly alerted the fire brigade, who rushed to the location. While extinguishing the fire, the responders noticed movement in the upstairs bedroom window, indicating someone was inside, seeking help. Medical personnel were summoned, and the person who was Jean-Claude Roman was rescued from the residence. Upon extraction, he appeared in a state of shock, unresponsive as paramedics attended to him. Subsequently, Jean-Claude was transported to the hospital, where he eventually lapsed into a coma. Within a short span, the fire was extinguished, enabling the first responders to enter the premises. Their family friend Dr. Luc Ladmiral was summoned to the scene, witnessing with dread as stretchers carried out the charred remains of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence. Whenever a household fire results in fatalities, the police launch an inquiry to uncover the circumstances surrounding the incident. This process aims to offer closure to the bereaved families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Therefore, following the tragic fire at the Roman residence, law enforcement authorities initiated an investigation, given the magnitude of the loss of an entire family of a prominent doctor. During the examination of Florence's remains, the medical team made a disconcerting observation: evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her skull. This revelation sparked suspicion and intrigue, particularly after determining that Florence's demise resulted from blunt force trauma rather than the fire itself. During the examination of the children, another distressing revelation emerged. Contrary to initial assumptions, both Caroline and Antoine did not perish in the fire. Instead, they met their demise from gunshot wounds hours prior to the inferno. This stark reality indicated that the events unfolded before the household was consumed by flames. Subsequently, law enforcement commenced an inquiry into the suspicious deaths of Florence and her children. However, with Jean-Claude Roman incapacitated in a coma, rendering him unable to provide any information, investigators faced the daunting task of pursuing alternative leads. Transforming the Roman residence into a crime scene, authorities reached out to relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors in a bid to unravel the mysteries surrounding the family.
Luc L'Admiral, the doctor who witnessed the victims being removed from the scene, was contacted as part of the investigation. Uncertain about the unfolding events, he struggled to comprehend the situation. When questioned by investigators about potential enemies of the family, Luc couldn't identify any. Nevertheless, he was summoned for an interview. Several days later, Luc found himself facing police officers who probed into the family's relationships and recent events that could have triggered the fire. Despite thorough questioning, the consensus remained unchanged. The family enjoyed a positive reputation, and no significant incidents preceded the tragedy. Subsequently, the focus shifted to Jean-Claude Roman, revealing a shocking revelation. Roman had never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor had he delivered any lectures at the University of Dijon. In fact, he was not a qualified doctor at all, let alone being employed. Initially skeptical, Luc's disbelief grew as he recollected their shared academic journey, which slowly led him to a startling realization. He recounted to the authorities an incident from their second year when he had noticed Jean-Claude Roman's absence during an exam. This departure from Roman's usual behavior had raised concerns for Luc. Upon visiting Roman at his residence, he observed his friend's ailing condition, who had clammy skin, pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude Roman disclosed that he was battling lymphoma, a form of cancer, albeit manageable, exacerbated by exam-related stress. At Roman's request, Luc pledged to keep this information confidential, especially from Florence. Investigators determined that Luc didn't have any additional pertinent details. Consequently, they awaited the forensic laboratory's findings on the charred residence, hoping to glean further insights for their inquiry. Investigators noted peculiarities within the residence. They discovered that all doors had been locked internally, indicating that no unauthorized individuals had entered the premises. Initially, an accidental fire was the primary hypothesis until the condition of the bodies was revealed. Subsequent findings hinted at a more sinister turn of events, prompting the urgent need to interview Jean-Claude. During Jean-Claude Roman's coma-induced weeks, law enforcement zeroed in on him as their prime suspect, initiating a thorough investigation. Although Roman lacked a medical degree, his extended tenure at the university raised suspicions. Upon contacting the educational institution, it was confirmed that Roman had pursued studies for 12 years. While he successfully completed his first-year exams, he failed to pass those in the second year. Exploiting the absence of enrollment restrictions, Roman continuously re-enrolled in the second year throughout his academic tenure. All those years of academic dedication, attending lectures and studying medical books, yet Jean-Claude's failure to pass the second-year examination seemed perplexing. The possibility of oversleeping and missing the exam session lingered as a plausible explanation. A chance for redemption had presented itself with the opportunity to retake the exam months later, but he never showed up. As investigators delved into the deaths of Florence and the children, they were confronted with another grim discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, seeking to relay the tragic news to his parents, arrived at their residence only to encounter an eerie silence. Upon entering, he discovered the lifeless bodies of his mother and father, both victims of gunshot wounds. A ballistic examination confirmed that Jean-Claude's parents had been fatally shot with the same firearm used on Antoine and Caroline.
Furthermore, the close proximity of their estimated time of death indicated a deliberate connection. The unfolding events only grew more mysterious. Following the public disclosure of the tragedies, the police received an anonymous call from a woman unwilling to disclose her identity or any personal information, expressing reluctance to involve herself in the investigation. However, she did possess crucial information to share, revealing that she had engaged in a romantic relationship with Jean-Claude Roman after meeting him in Paris, and she too had been told that he was a researcher at the World Health Organization. Roman had misled her into believing he was a specialist with influential connections attributed to his purported role. The woman had been led to believe that Jean-Claude Roman was actively involved in and financing significant research projects. Moreover, he portrayed the banks in Geneva as highly advantageous. Leveraging his supposed position, Roman enticed her with the opportunity to invest funds in a Swiss bank offering an impressive 18% interest rate return. Through persuasive tactics, Roman managed to persuade his lover to make a financial investment. Initially hesitant, they reached an agreement wherein the woman would provide him with 90,000 francs for investment, with the expectation of receiving returns after 3 months.
As the deadline approached in early January, she reminded Jean-Claude Romand of their arrangement, emphasizing her need for the funds to sustain herself and her family. Following negotiations, they arranged to meet for a dinner gathering, with Romand extending an invitation to dine with a prominent political figure, sparking the woman's interest and eagerness to reclaim her investment. On the agreed day, Romand picks her up in Paris to embark on their anticipated journey. As night descended, Jean-Claude Romand and the woman found themselves still on the road, clearly lost. Suddenly, Romand pulled over and launched a surprise attack on the woman inside the car. He employed tear gas, a stun wand, and a cable in an attempt to incapacitate her. However, she fiercely fought for her life and managed to escape from the vehicle. Romand pursued her, but inexplicably halted when she pleaded for mercy. It seemed that he realized his plan had failed, and he begged for forgiveness. The excuse he provided to the woman was now familiar to the investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike his usual self. In a state of survival mode, the woman agreed to remain silent about the incident in exchange for Jean-Claude safely returning her home. Investigators began to develop a grim perception of Jean-Claude Romand. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a scam artist. But the question that lingered in detectives' minds now was he also a murderer? Upon awakening from his coma, Jean-Claude Romand was promptly approached by investigators eager to engage in conversation. With suspicions lingering, they sought a confession from him. However, Romand chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, gazing into the distance with a vacant expression, refraining from speaking. As inquiries swirled about the events of January 9th, the origins of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, the severe injuries sustained by his wife, the discovery of his deceased parents, Jean-Claude faced a barrage of interrogative probes during multiple sessions. Despite the relentless questioning, he divulged nothing. It wasn't until the investigators told him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that a shift occurred. The tipping point that prompted him to finally break his silence remains unknown, but eventually he began to speak. On the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were spending a typical evening at home. After putting the children to bed, they retired to their own bedroom. According to Jean-Claude Romand, his memories of that night abruptly ceased until the chilling recollection of discovering his wife sprawled on their bed, surrounded by a pool of blood, with a bloodied rolling pin in his hand. Uncertain of what transpired, whether an argument had ensued or not, Jean-Claude Romand proceeded to sleep beside his wife and awoke the following morning to prepare breakfast for the children. Caroline and Antoine gathered on the couch to watch a cartoon selected by their father. He served them each a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch television. When the children inquired about their mother's absence, he informed them that she was unwell and needed extra rest. During that morning, Jean-Claude observed that Caroline felt warm, prompting concerns about her health. To prevent any potential illness from spreading, he instructed Caroline to go upstairs to her bedroom. Somehow, Caroline ended up lying face down on the bed with a pillow over her head. Romand couldn't provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding this sequence of events, but speculated that it may have evolved from a game he played with his daughter. Subsequently, he retrieved his .22 caliber rifle, fitted with a silencer, and fatally shot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of her head. In a similar manner, Antoine met his tragic demise. His memories then became hazy. Subsequent evidence presented during the trial indicated that he left the house, purchased newspapers, and appeared to engage in routine activities, portraying a normal demeanor to any casual observer. Upon returning home, he watched television. Although Jean-Claude refuted these details during the trial, one fact remained certain. He received a phone call from his parents, inviting him for lunch before noon on that fateful day. And he accepted the invitation. Departing from his eerily quiet residence, he drove to his parents' home and joined them for lunch. He then summoned his father upstairs under the guise of inspecting a purportedly malfunctioning boiler pipe. Despite his elderly father's physical limitations, he made an effort to examine the pipe at Jean-Claude's request, only to be callously shot in the back by his own son. Descending to where his mother was, he did not concoct any games or stories this time. His mother became the sole victim whom he shot while facing her. The motive behind this act remains a mystery,
Before departing, he also shot the family's dog. When questioned about this during the trial, it was the only instance where he exhibited a semblance of remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in sobs and tears, revealing that the dog had been cherished by his children, evoking memories of Caroline. It was at this moment that Jean-Claude Roman resolved to return home and take his own life. However, his plan did not unfold as intended. Recall the earlier mention of his mistress providing him with 90,000 francs for an alleged investment scheme? This was how Jean-Claude Roman sustained himself. He regaled numerous individuals, including his relatives and Florence's family, with tales of extravagant returns on investments, and due to their familiarity with Roman, they placed their full trust in him and they let him cook. Consequently, he amassed substantial sums of money from these trusting individuals over time. He would channel these funds into accounts under his own name in Geneva, thereby avoiding scrutiny from tax authorities, among others. Moreover, he meticulously managed the family's financial affairs, ensuring that Florence remained unaware of his deceitful activities. Of course, and eventually, the inevitable time to serve what he was cooking had arrived. As expected, the people began demanding the return of their money, along with the promised profits. Regrettably, this was an obligation he could never fulfill. Every single franc he acquired was swiftly spent on his immediate needs, leaving him with virtually nothing saved, despite amassing over 2 million francs across the years. The inevitable moment arrived when he would have to reveal the truth to Florence and all those who had entrusted him with their money. He found himself unable to sustain his web of lies any longer. The mounting pressure left him feeling trapped with no apparent escape. Like many other family annihilators, he convinced himself that by ending their lives, he would actually be sparing his family from the repercussions of his actions. Subsequently, he planned to take his own life, thus avoiding the harsh reality he faced. He believed he would be able to keep lying forever and had never anticipated being discovered or facing the need to confess. He would always just plan to fabricate another falsehood to sustain the charade throughout his life. On June 23, 1996, the trial commenced. He remained mostly silent, seated behind glass with a police officer on each side. He avoided making eye contact and kept his head down. By July 2nd, a verdict had been reached. Jean-Claude Roman was convicted of the murders of his wife, his children, and his parents. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 22 years. In 2019, he petitioned for release from prison to reside in a convent. During his incarceration, he had reportedly become a devout Christian. He had accepted his mistakes and would spend the rest of his life repenting as a form of punishment. The judge granted his plea, citing his good conduct as a contributing factor. It is sad and unfortunate what all the victims endured at the hands of this liar, manipulator, and monstrous individual. As we reflect on this horrific tale, our hearts and minds are with the individuals whose lives were abruptly ended and the grieving families and friends they left behind.